All right, here we go. Today is Sunday, October 27th, 2024, and this is episode 284 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Kellett.
Good evening, Jerry. I see you're at the undisclosed secret Southern Command location.
Yes, I'm in a different location in the Southern compound, because the Southern compound is about to get new floors.
Oh. Well, that sounds very fun.
Yes, and it'll be exciting.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Anyway, happy Sunday.
So, happy Sunday. How you doing?
I'm good. I have to go back to work tomorrow. You don't. So, that makes me just a little bitter.
I gotta figure out how to move some intractably large furniture so that the flooring can go in. So that'll be my fun. But yeah, life continues to be good. I've at some point got to figure out how I'm going to start earning money again. But I'm kicking that can down the road as long as I can.
That's a future Jerry problem.
Yes, exactly. That's a future Jerry problem.
That's fair.
Cool. So just before we get into the stories, a reminder that the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and do not represent those of our employers, even if some of us don't have employers.
Any future, past, or multi-dimensional employers.
Correct. Correct. So the first story we have today comes from CNBC, and the title here is Delta sues CrowdStrike after widespread IT outage that caused thousands of cancellations. This has obviously been in the works for a while. We've talked about it several times in the past, but it has finally landed. Delta is indeed suing CrowdStrike in Georgia for the low price, $500 million, claiming that they have lost $380 million in revenue as a result of the breach, and then another $170 million in costs. So that's a big number. And they're claiming in the lawsuit.
Plus they want punitive damages and legal fees.
Yeah.
Which could go even higher.
Yeah. Certainly with, legal fees would be on that sum of money would be quite large. Yes.
I bet.
So, this is an interesting one because the allegations are that CrowdStrike breached their contract and they were negligent in the processing of their agreement. So the negligence, by the way, doesn't surprise me. I actually expected that was going to be the case. It surprises me that they're pointing to a contract violation. So I have not had a chance to read the actual complaint. So it'll be very interesting to see if they enumerate exactly how they're asserting the contract was breached. They do say, by the way, that they are asserting that CrowdStrike was derelict in their duty. They did not test. They were, I'm trying to find the exact wording, but basically they were cutting corners to benefit themselves financially was their allegations.
Yeah, I think you predicted quite accurately a couple of episodes ago when we talked about this last, that Delta would have to prove gross negligence to overcome the terms and condition sort of indemnity that CrowdStrike has in their typical terms and conditions. We have no idea what contract Delta and CrowdStrike signed. However, discovery, if we get to that point, I think will be fascinating to follow. And if this goes the distance, this actually could have a very large and long range ramification and widespread. That's where it's ramification, I think, on the computer security industry.
Oh, 100%. To me, by the way, this feels like one that's going to get settled out of court. But having said that, I don't know for sure. I will say, I think that Delta has a lot more to lose in the discovery process than CrowdStrike has, because I think CrowdStrike has kind of publicly, self-immolated. Like they've gone in front of Congress. They've written blog posts about what happened, and I'm sure there's some details that have yet to see the light of day. But I think that Delta is, CrowdStrike's response, by the way, is a little, I guess, a little bitter. They said, quote, while we aimed to reach a business resolution that puts customers first, Delta has chosen a different path. The CrowdStrike spokesperson told CNBC in an email. Delta's claims are based on disproven information, demonstrate a lack of understanding of how modern cybersecurity works, and reflect a desperate attempt to shift the blame for its slow recovery away from its failure to modernize its antiquated IT infrastructure. So
Southwest would like word about antiquated IT infrastructure and how it protected them.
I think all the airlines have some version of an antiquated IT infrastructure, but that I think, by the way, is the downside for Delta, right? They're gonna have their IT practices put on full display.
Yeah, I didn't see it in this article, and so take this with a grain of salt. But I had read elsewhere that CrowdStrike had previously offered $30 million in compensation to Delta to settle. So I don't know if that's true. I read it in some article somewhere, but I've been looking for it and I haven't seen it in other articles. So I don't know if that was folklore that got reported somewhere or if it's accurate. But if that is true, it's interesting that is sort of the number that CrowdStrike came back with as an opening of negotiation, if that happened.
Well, they did. So they did lower CrowdStrike, I should say. They, being CrowdStrike, did lower their full year guidance on profits because of the package that they're putting together to compensate customers who were harmed by the incident. So it's entirely possible that they had some formulation that resulted in Delta getting a proposed $30 million. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. I don't think that sounds out of character.
One side piece of this I noticed, I just was curious how CrowdStrike stock was doing. So they're a public company, and sort of like the most recent high before the event came in at $377. Their low after the event, they bottomed out at $217. They're back up already to $320 to $300 range. Now, this lawsuit, I'm sure, will hurt them again, but it's interesting just on that event, how much they've already recovered in their stock price in the last 6 months.
Yeah, I have a feeling that it kind of reflects the reality, and this is not unique to this particular situation. We see similar things with companies that have gotten breached, where they and I don't think it even happens all that often anymore, where their stock price will take a hit and then it'll recover. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm never shopping at Target or Home Depot or wherever. I'm never shopping there again." But you know what? Well, you do, and their stock price recovers. And I think that, realistically, that recovery is a reflection of confidence in the market. Their future earnings are not going to be materially hampered by whatever's going on. So yeah, they're going to, even with this lawsuit, even if they lose, they could have to pay out. Let's say they have to pay out $1 billion. That's a lot of money, but it doesn't necessarily have a material impact on CrowdStrike's potential future growth.
Yeah, long term.
I mean, maybe it diverts money away from R&D, but I'm sure
They have a
company
market
is
cap
fast.
right now of just over $73.5 billion. That's pretty healthy.
That's healthy.
Yeah, their earnings per year revenue was $3.516 billion last year. Just looking, source of this is CNBC's page on CrowdStrike. So, that's, I'm hopefully relatively accurate. So gross margin, their gross margin, 75.37%. That is an insanely high gross margin. Wow. Anyway, so I think what we're saying is that we should
welcome to the technical analysis podcast.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we're going to start a hedge fund buying on bad news in cybersecurity companies and just waiting for the bounce back. Yeah. I mean, some people might. Who knows? This is not investment advice. I'm not your investment advisor. If you do it and it makes you money, send me a Starbucks card. Okay. So, but back to the industry at large. If this goes to the distance, as we were saying earlier, and CrowdStrike loses a bunch of money on this, I wonder what kind of chilling effect that might have on cutting edge innovation in cybersecurity defense. And does that give the bad guys a potential advantage if the defenders suddenly get cold feet about being aggressive in defending against the bad guys?
Certainly possible. I mean, there is some moral hazard in the whole no good deed goes unpunished. Now, I mean, like this a difficult situation because clearly CrowdStrike could have done better, probably a lot better. But here we are. So at the same time, like we I guess, like from a narrative perspective, what you just said makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, like we see other companies like SentinelOne and some of the others like already doing the whole vulture thing. So
right.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a good question. There was one other thing I found interesting in here is Delta asserted that they had auto updates turned off.
Yeah, I did see that. And yet it still came down anyway. I've got to think that that's it. I haven't ever admin CrowdStrike. Okay, so take with a grain of salt. But I got to think there's different options for automatic updates of different varieties and different types, right? Is this an automatic agent update? Is this an automatic definition update? Is this an automatic, there's probably different choices. And I'm assuming they had maybe something off and something else on that they didn't realize.
Yeah, I think it was agent updates, and this issue was in their channel file, which I don't know. As we've talked about in the past, I think that was one of the one of the concessions that CrowdStrike recently said that they were making a change on, that they were going to be treating those channel file updates as actual code updates
and giving admins more control over their rollout schedule and methodology.
Exactly.
So, don't know. We will see. I will watch this one. I definitely want to find the text of the lawsuit. I did a quick search before the show and I ran out of time and I couldn't find it. It's supposedly in Fulton County, which is one of our main counties here in Georgia. Their Superior Court system, I was searching the records, found a lot of other interesting lawsuits that Delta's involved with, but not this one. A lot of garnishing of wages going on with Delta employees, just for the record.
Interesting.
I mean, that could be the case with any major employers. I have no idea what normal is for how many garnishing of wage lawsuits happen, but it was.
They are a very large employer here in
one of our biggest
Georgia area,
I think.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yep. So if this doesn't get settled out of court, we'll be talking about this crazy thing, probably till 2030.
Tis true. It'll be a long, long cycle. But you know what? I think you're right there. I think this will get settled.
Yeah.
I don't think it's in anybody's best interest for this to go all the way.
No.
The question is,
The only people, this is one of those situations where the only people who win are the lawyers.
right. And look, to be clear, I'm also not like taking sides here. I'm not rooting for or against either of these companies. I bet some of the discovery that would come out would not look good for anybody. And I think they know that, but I think this is how lawyers maximize their settlement options.
Yeah. So just to go meta for a second, like I think I also find it interesting how both sides are throwing each other under the bus. Like CrowdStrike is saying, like this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't had this old ass infrastructure, and Delta is saying, this would never have happened if you hadn't been cutting corners. And so they're just like pushing each other down in front of a bus, trying to see, which one, who actually gets run over. But I think the peril there is like you're always one step away from something bad happening like this. And if Delta does want to go all the way, they are going to necessarily air all their dirty laundry from a security perspective, from an IT management perspective. And on the converse, CrowdStrike has already had, they've already experienced a lot of discomfort. So,
Right.
I mean, I think they've got more ahead of them, but not as much as I think as Delta does, though.
That's a good point. I mean, CrowdStrike has already kind of had to open the kimono before Congress and everybody else, and Delta really hasn't had to. So that's a very good point. We'll see. We'll see.
All right. Moving on to our next story. This one comes from the Register, and the title here is Tech Firms to Pay Millions in SEC Penalties for Misleading SolarWinds Disclosures.
This is the event that just keeps on eventing.
Oh, yes. So back 4 years ago, those of you who remember,
That's like
we had a couple things
ago.
2 internets ago. We had a couple things going on at that time. That was right at the upswing of COVID. But SolarWinds announced there was the big news about the SolarWinds hack, and many, many, many companies and organizations were impacted by it. And I think by now, at least people in the US understand that public companies have to disclose when they've been breached, if that breach is material. And therein lies, I think, some of the rub. Which, by the way, teaser, we have another thing coming that will help explain this a little bit.
Ooh, mysterious.
So, I know. Looking forward to that. So in this instance, with these 4 companies, they had all published 8K reports. Actually, I think one of them actually had not published an 8K report because they didn't know it at the time, but it was Avaya, Checkpoint, Mimecast, and Unisys. And Avaya and Checkpoint basically I would characterize it as downplaying the significance of the breach. They acknowledged that there was something going on, but basically said it wasn't material. And the SEC conducted investigation over the past several years and concluded that that was not correct. And both, by the way, all 4 have settled for right around the three of them, Avaya, Checkpoint, and Mimecast, have settled for right around $1 million. And Unisys, I think, agreed to pay $4 million. And all of them have basically said that they didn't do anything wrong, but they're settling in the best interest of just moving forward. So it's this is a tough situation because the requirement or the wording around when you need to notify is a little ambiguous. Now, to the SEC's credit, they continue to publish guidance and publications on what it means, what material means. However, in these instances, the SEC alleged, and the companies kind of relented, and that they got it wrong.
Yeah.
Now, what I will tell you, like when I read some of the impacts. So, for example, Avaya didn't disclose there were at least 145 files in their cloud sharing environment that were accessed. Now, there's not any kind of subjective or objective indication of how significant is that. Like, what are those 145 files? If they're like, a user manual, I
Right.
Anyway, I have to assume that there's been some kind of an assessment to say like those 145 files were pretty damn important and worthy of worthy of being disclosed as a material breach. So it comes back, like the whole point of disclosing is these public companies are funded in part by shareholders. And as a shareholder, you have certain rights. You have rights to understand what's going on in the company. The company has to operate with some level of transparency so that you know whether you want to continue on with your investment or you're going to vote the leadership team out, or like there's lots of levers that you can pull as a shareholder, but it's predicated on you knowing what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
And so the SEC continues to try to, shine light into the dark corners where these incidents are happening so that investors actually can see, what's happening. Because I think the concern is companies are making a determination that like it's not relevant or it's not material. Like it's just some people got in, they downloaded some files. It's just not a big deal. So like it's not material.
Well, couple things. I think the thing that surprised me most about the story is that Unisys is still in business. That was quite surprising to me.
I personally, I will agree with you. Yes.
But secondarily, there's something we were musing about in our mysterious thing that we're teasing. I wonder where this broke down. Was this the frontline security team downplayed it to their leadership because there was a culture of, hey, don't bring me bad news, and like people get punished for bringing bad news, which is a problem? Or did it get communicated and then legal didn't understand it, so they didn't file it properly? Or it got communicated and senior executives like, no, don't worry about that. And they kind of waved legal off. Like, there's a lot of things where this could have gone sideways, whether it was through misunderstanding or intentional or not. I mean, they're not admitting that they did anything wrong, but let's just go with the theory that they did. Was it intentional or not, or was it a misunderstanding, or was it as you said, what does material mean? And, so this is an interesting one being public and is a bit of a pain in the butt because you got to follow all these rules and understand what all these things mean. And, you go to jail if you get it wrong or get fined a lot of money. So it's, so I don't know. It's like in our role, executives don't always understand what we're talking about, but they listen to us, right? And we try to explain it in their language and their verbiage and communicate well. So they understand the risks and they make the right call. Lawyers do the same thing. And in this case, those who are specialists with dealing with the SEC and their regulatory filings for being public and all the finance details is this probably this weird intersection between the CFO, the legal team, all these folks to understand this. I could see a lot of opportunity for misunderstanding to happen there and things to go sideways.
Yeah, I think most public companies have an investor relations function too that helps kind of adjudicate what is, right. what makes sense to disclose.
And but at the flip side is I see the SEC probably looking for opportunities to make examples.
Oh, clearly so. Clearly so. What was interesting to me is that it wasn't a lot of money. I mean, they got fined and there's lots of hay being made about it. And certainly we're here talking about it. But in the scheme of things, it wasn't a lot of money.
No.
Like the fines weren't huge. I mean, certainly Unisys was pretty big, but I think when you read the details about Unisys, like I'm not sure they were all there.
I mean, let's put it in context. $4 million was like 1 year of salary for you in your last gig. So it's really, it's living money. It's walking around money.
Yeah, it's pocket change. Yeah.
So they fire a couple of interns. They'll be fine.
Have to cancel one of the Bentleys.
We're gonna get hate mail from interns.
That'll be all right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I one of the other I think takeaways, because a couple of the takeaways, number one is, as a security person, I think you started to touch on this. As a security person, we are the SMEs, right? And I don't know. Again, we don't know. Like, we're totally hypothesizing about what happened here, and maybe everything worked great, and like it was just a disagreement in, it's a reasonable, people conclude different things type of situation. I don't know. The whole point of this is to kind of game things out and see what we can learn. But I think one of the stark realities is, as security people, we are the advice and counsel. Like, we are the ones, as a CISO, like when something bad happened, I was the one who would help the business understand, what actually happened and what the potential impact could be. Like, how bad could bad get?
Right.
And if, like, you don't have the right lines of communication in place, and that those kinds of discussions aren't being had, then you can end up with some issues. I'm not saying that's what happened here.
Right.
The only thing we know is what's been reported. I am concerned. Like, I just Checkpoint as an example, like they filed as is described in the article here, very generic. Their disclosures were made in very generic terms, and even after the fine, like their follow up was, done in very generic terms. And I have to wonder if that's because they're a security company.
Maybe. I worked for Checkpoint for about 5 years. Checkpoint is like one of the top technology firms in Israel. It's the rock star company of cybersecurity in Israel.
Sure.
And they're very proud of their technology and very proud of what they've done. So
that's good. I mean, like, they've got good technologies. No denying that.
And I'm trying to say this without it coming off as like a bitter ex-employee, which I'm not. I enjoyed my time there, but their leadership style was very confident.
Let me say this: I've worked at a lot of companies, a lot of big companies, and I've had exposure to their top leadership, and I've never met them that weren't.
That's fair. That's very fair.
I'm not sure that that's a,
that might not be any sort of indicator of anything, right? Nothing unique.
No.
Yeah.
No. All it means is that they are like the head cheerleader for their company, which is what the company pays them to be. So
sure.
I look. One of the things I suppose, again, this is our opportunity to advise the business. Breaches, especially in the ransomware area, are so common. Like, they are happening at the rate of dozens, perhaps hundreds per day. Like, there are so many that happen. We don't even know. We can't keep up with them all.
Right.
They're happening faster than AWS is releasing new offerings. It's freaking crazy. And so, like, I don't know we're afraid of anymore. Like
Yeah, the stigma is not there.
The stigma isn't there.
Yeah.
Like, and I would also say, like, I think it's getting to the point now where you're looking a little silly. You try to play play games because, like, it happens to everybody.
Right.
It just happens. Take your lumps, be honest about it, learn from it, do better, and move on.
Well, one takeaway that I got from this, if I were in a public company, I'd want to, when I'm not in the middle of a crisis, have a good long sit down with legal and investor relations and executive leadership and say, okay, what do we define as material? And let's write it down. How many files do you care about?
It's a great idea.
What impact to the business should we be going to DEFCON 1 at, right? And then preset those and see if you can get the regulators to sign off on them. It's like 5 files is no big deal. 20 files, you need to let the chairman of the board know, like, at least then security is off the hook in terms of like, we followed the process that was signed off by executive leadership, et cetera, et cetera.
So establishing some thresholds ahead of time.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. And doing that in peacetime rather than in the thick of a problem is
right.
Probably a good idea. So anyway, look, the companies here settled. They've paid their penance. I think all of them have learned a lesson.
Oddly, they all paid in Apple gift cards, which I found surprising, novel even.
Okay. They had to they had to go get MoneyGrams, right, to pay their fines. They have to pay the fine in Bitcoin.
Don't know.
Yes.
It's late on a Sunday. I do what I can. Carry on.
No, I mean, look, the just particular details of these companies is obviously not known to us. I think the more interesting thing is the SEC is paying attention. Like, this happened 4 years ago, and they've clearly been investigating. And I would say just even more so, like, if you were caught up in one of these big breaches, like a SolarWinds or a not Log4j, but let's say Snowflake or one of those where, like, it's obvious that you're one of the impacted parties, like, don't freaking try to downplay it.
Yeah.
It's just one more problem on you. And further, as a former CISO, like, I worry about potential personal liability in making the wrong decision. Now, I don't think there was any allegations of, there's no criminality, or it was all civil stuff, but that could change. And we have started to see some of that change. So, like, I guess what I'm saying is act with transparency and ethics. Like, that is what we have. Like, that's the only thing we've got.
So you're saying it's not necessarily the crime that's so bad, it's the cover-up?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
I appreciate when your mom covers up.
Jesus Christ. Been so long. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right, our next story comes from Bleeping Computer, and the title here is Black Basta ransomware poses as IT support on Microsoft Teams to breach networks. Oh my God. So Black Basta, for those of you who don't know, is allegedly one of the shards, not shards, but shards. Maybe a shard too. I don't know.
You ever wonder what they call themselves? They're probably like,
I don't know.
Like Group 73. They're like, oh man, this is a much cooler name. Let's go for that. Thanks, random researcher dude.
Which reminds me of the Jen Easterly comment about, like, stop giving them such cool names.
Yeah.
So anyway, there was a group called the Conti Crimeware Syndicate that fell apart a couple of years ago. They actually themselves got hacked, and they kind of splintered off into a bunch of different pieces. And it is believed that one of the pieces is now this Black Basta ransomware group. And they have a pretty interesting and clever technique up until recently, their MO, the way they would operate is they would target an employee. How they pick the target, I have no idea.
LinkedIn.
Probably LinkedIn. And they would start sending them spam, and like a lot of spam. And I'm assuming they know that they're somewhat adept at bypassing spam filters and whatnot. Anyway, that they're sending large amounts of spam to this person. And then after some period of time, and it keeps on going, they will call the person, like on the phone. They will call them and say, I am with, your company's help desk, and I'm here to help you with your spam issue. And so they've kind of primed the person who was probably ready to be done with the spam to cooperate with help desk.
They're thinking, look how awesome my IT department is.
Exactly. They're very proactive.
Yeah, that's
super
impressive.
proactive.
5
And
stars.
that should be your first cue, right? Like,
Day.
I know, I'm sorry to all the help desk people out there. That was mean.
Much love to
Uncalled
help
for.
desk for me, by the way. Unlike Jerry
Uncalled
here,
for. It's uncalled for.
you're going to get angry letters from help desk. I'm going to get them from the interns. You're going to get from help desk. A lot of angry letters this week.
It's all right. So,
All right. So they call up. They're like, hey, we're going to help you with your spam.
Yeah, but you have to go and turn on remote access so I can access your computer.
Clearly.
And that's where everything goes wrong.
Horribly.
It's horribly wrong. So they convince the person to install AnyDesk or provide remote access through the default, Windows support assistant. And then once that connection is established, they will install a host of stuff like Screen Connect, Net Support, and everybody's favorite Cobalt Strike. And then once they do that, then it's game over. Now, by the way, like that is, they're not intending to target that specific workstation. The target is like the company's fleet, right? They're trying again to go after the company writ large because they're trying to land, a multi-million-dollar or tens of millions of dollar ransom with this type of attack.
So that's their foothold. They start then moving laterally throughout the organization.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So that was how they were doing it. And how they are now doing it has evolved slightly. So they're still sending boatloads of spam because, like, if that works, why would you stop, right?
Sure.
But now I think they found a way to make it look even more authoritative by using Teams. So I think many companies now are settling on Teams. I think Microsoft has made it very financially attractive to move off of third party. So if you're in any way a Microsoft shop, I think they've made it very attractive for you to ditch your WebExes and whatever other
Slack.
Tools
Zoom.
and exactly Zoom, Slack, whatever, and settle on Teams. And so now what they've got is for companies who have not properly locked down their Microsoft accounts, the actor here has been creating basically domains the on Microsoft.com tenant IDs that look like authoritative looking. And so some examples were securityadminhelper.onmicrosoft.com and cybersecurityadmin.onmicrosoft.com. And they will then try to connect via Teams to the victim. And again, offering to help.
Yeah. So you can have external users if you have this option turned on, connect into your Teams tenant. And unless your users are very clever, they don't necessarily know that that's somebody outside the company. There might be an implicit trust. If they're coming over the Teams, they're inside the company.
Right. Yeah. And then they set the name, they set their username as help desk. And, so even if you I guess if you dig a little bit, you see that the name of the tenant ID, which again looks somewhat legitimate-ish. And so it it's all intending to establish that trust. Again, it's apparently been somewhat effective with companies that have this open relationship enabled. So they from there it basically proceeds the same way, right? They convince the employee to start a screen sharing session where they install. Ultimately, the intention is to install CrowdStrike, again, which lets them take over the network.
I will be honest, given the amount of political spam I've been getting to my phone, if somebody called me to offer to help stop that, I probably would let them.
What do you need? Good stuff.
Living in a swing state is exciting this time of year.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. So, I think once they've got CrowdStrike on a computer, particularly Windows computer, there's a myriad ways for lateral movement. It's not guaranteed. You may have other really awesome controls in your environment that will detect and mitigate the attacks, but I think that in general this has been a pretty effective technique. I suspect, by the way, that if they're going through the trouble of identifying a specific person at a specific organization, they're probably also doing a little bit of weeding out, looking for companies that, have the ability to connect in through Teams and perhaps aren't super sophisticated, to be able to detect CrowdStrike.
Right.
So
yeah. So key takeaways for me: lock down Teams to approval for external connections, and maybe block the ability for any of your endpoints to load any of your remote access tools. That would stop a lot.
Yes, or definitely minimally detect it, but certainly unless your help desk is using them, you need to take steps to lock the. Wow. It's an attractive nuisance. Like if it's not these guys, it's going to be somebody else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole, do you want your users running as admin debate here? This is an age-old sort of set of problems, but this is so common where we see like an AnyDesk or remote helper or whatever loaded that if you could just find those and stop those from being installed by some sort of central administration tool, you're probably going to, and then get an alert when somebody tries, you'll probably stop a lot of this, or at least be forewarned when it's starting to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. The last story today comes from Ars Technica. This one is near and dear to my heart because it unfolded on the Fediverse. And so it was kind of wild watching this.
So you're saying it's your fault?
No, it's not my fault. Yeah, this comes from Ars Technica, and the title here is FortiGate Admins Report Active Exploitation 0-Day. Vendor Isn't Talking.
This, by the way, is a very scary scenario for me. This is like one of the worst case ones in my mind of things that keep me up at night. So please, to your summary, sir.
The exact timing of everything is still very unclear to me. And even after I've read everything that I could find about the situation, sometime before October 13th, there was it was detected that some adversary was exploiting a vulnerability in FortiManager. And effectively what it relied on was, and I'm oversimplifying to a fault here, so apologies, but if you connect, all you need to connect a Fortinet firewall into a FortiManager is a certificate. And through a vulnerability, you can effectively force feed it a Fortinet firewall. And then there was also a vulnerability in the Fortinet manager that would allow an actor-controlled or an adversary-controlled firewall to run a arbitrary command on the Fortinet manager. And that, by the way, would happen regardless. So as long as there was some way, some sort of connection, even if it was behind NAT, even if there was a firewall in the way, if there was any sort of connectivity between the Fortinet manager and the adversary-controlled Fortinet firewall, they could effectively take over the environment.
Yeah, and to be clear, the Fortinet manager is a tool meant to manage a bunch of network equipment, including firewalls.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was remote code open to the internet for a lot of people. I think somebody said 60,000 of these were seen with Shodan.
Right.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean,
yeah. But what made it worse is that Fortinet was not, they apparently were aware, but were not publishing any information. Now, at some point, I think sometime around October 17th, they allegedly, or as far as I can tell, this is where it starts to get murky. They sent emails out to some subset of their customers, letting them know that there was an update pending and that they needed to take some kind of protective or mitigating measures, like, removing access to the Fortinet manager from the internet
but
and so on.
No vulnerability disclosure, no warnings, no.
We didn't say what happened or why.
Yeah. No sense of urgency around it necessarily.
Right. Just very mysterious. And it wasn't sent to everybody as well. There's lots of Fortinet customers saying, I never got that. Now, I don't know, like, if they had the wrong contact information and they tried, I have no idea. But the problem here is, there was some period of time where this vulnerability, which is very serious, was under active exploitation. And I think that was happening before Fortinet became aware of it. And then even after they did become aware of it, they, I suppose, started working on a fix, but they were not communicating. And it took a long time, by the way. I think it was only recently, within the past few days, that they actually published the CVE that actually describes what the vulnerability is, and as well as obviously releasing patches. So, but this as far is the thing that is on your network, on the perimeter of your network, protecting you.
As far as I know, there's still been no public advisory from Fortinet on this.
They did. There is an advisory now.
Oh, is there now? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. This article's a few days old. Okay. Sorry.
It was I believe it was on the 25th. Yeah. Again, the timing is really weird. Like, if you if you go to the Fortinet advisory, it has a date of October 17th, but then it says October 20th is updated on October 25th. And as far as I can tell, the first time anybody seems to become aware of it was on October 25th, which was only 2 days ago as of the time we were recording this. So again, I don't exactly know the timing. I think the problem I have with this situation is just the lack of transparency. And when you read this article, like, that kind of comes out in spades.
Yeah.
And it scares the crap out of me to rely on this thing to protect my network when I've got I have this level of uncertainty about the status of one of my primary controls.
Yeah, I'm looking, like, in their blog. Look, this is live, so take it with a grain of salt, but I'm not seeing anything jumping out at me on their website, on their blog. I see a nice article they've published about nation states burning 0 days against Avanti, one of their competitors.
Here, I just pinged it to you. It's in their PCERT.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Oh, yeah. But, yeah. Okay. Yeah. This was published October 17th. Up to October 25th. Odd.
Yeah, but then if you go down to the bottom,
Yeah.
it says initial publication October 23rd. So that's why I say I don't understand. But so if you are the user of Fortinet firewalls and you have a Fortinet manager, which you probably do, and it was in any way accessible from the internet, which was apparently a pretty good chance that was in fact the case, there are a set of steps that you really should be taking to determine if you were hacked.
The CVE was created on 9/27.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So September 27th.
Wow.
Wow. Look, I'm just reporting what I'm seeing. So
yeah,
that's what I was
allocated.
Yeah. Does not necessarily reflect when the vulnerability was discovered. Okay, fine. But interesting, because that's when Fortinet requested, maybe it's coincidence. Maybe they had another CVE they were requested and repurposed. I don't know, but look, I think the takeaway is Fortinet was not being very transparent here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I mean, credit to your amazing infosec.exchange Mastodon server on the Fediverse for participating in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, it was Kevin Beaumont, who's on a different server, who was really leading a lot of the discussion. But they actually linked to his account through infosec.exchange. So I
did see that. Cool. That's what I thought. That's why I thought he was on your server. My bad.
I think that's pretty cool.
I think if it weren't for your tireless efforts, civilization would collapse.
Totally. It's like critical infrastructure at this point.
I think so. I think your wherever this is running should get like first priority for data or power restoration, like a hospital would.
I agree.
So, anywho, in all seriousness, like a unacknowledged, actively exploited 0-day on a required perimeter-facing device like a firewall is one of my worst fears. That's bad news bears right there. And I mean, what could you do? I mean, I guess in the real world, if you got a sniff of it, and it looks like Reddit was one of the first places that started talking about this, you could swap for another vendor, but who's prepared to do that? Like, this is a bad one.
Not fast, not as a reactionary.
No.
Like, or a precautionary measure. No, like I mean, look, bad things happen all the time. And as we've talked about several times today, it all comes down to how you respond.
Right.
And so like, if you're, when you pick a vendor like this, there are going to be vulnerabilities. Like every stinking firewall vendor right now, whether it's Checkpoint or Cisco or F5 or Evante, like every single freaking one of them has vulnerabilities. Some are more frequent and worse than others. I will admit that, but like you just, you're kind of, you're picking a somewhat long-term commitment, even if, you ultimately will replace it after a few years. It's not something that you're just going to like rip out on a weekend and replace. These are big, complicated things that are really tuned to your network. And so you are reliant on your supplier,
right?
Doing the right thing. And so like, I would be annoyed.
At least. Well, and it's not just these major vendors. I think a lot of you probably have a concentration of risk if they're using cloud providers and relying on whatever the built-in ACL controls on the cloud providers are, which is even more integrated, and you can't just swap that out. You're in a shared security model at that point. What if this, this hasn't happened as far as I know, the speculation. Well, let's say Google's, whatever their version of ACL controls are, or firewalls are between subnets, has a serious weakness on the edge. You're
Yeah,
completely reliant on Google to
Azure
find
has,
that.
yeah, Azure has had that happen several times now. So,
Yeah.
it's it's not unprecedented. But again, like you're reliant, like they actually have to take action. And I think what annoys me about this situation is the lack of communication.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I suspect I don't know what was going on. I have no idea what's going on. I can only assume that they were trying to not make a bad problem worse by like running around and telling everybody that there's some trivial 0 day that's easy to exploit, and suddenly it gets way worse. But when you read some of the stuff that's even in their PSERT post, I believe it says that the exploitation was being done in an automated way. So it wasn't like people were, it wasn't like a, dialing for dollars. Like this was just apparently scanning the internet looking for vulnerable systems. So I don't know what percentage of systems exposed were compromised. And if they knew that was happening and they weren't communicating, like that's a bad thing. I don't know for sure that that's what happened. I can't say that's what happened, but if it did happen, good God, that's bad.
Well, hopefully, maybe some of this press will get some reaction on them. But if they've already published their advisory, I doubt they're going to say anything more.
I agree with you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is, I'm sure this is a done deal for them, but look, I don't want Fortinet to fail. Like, I don't think they're necessarily, their firewalls are any better or any worse than any of the others. I think the impression here is they didn't do, or the appearance is they didn't do the right thing here. And I really hope that is the case, that they fix whatever process broke down and they do better next time.
Yeah.
But as defenders, we have to be cognizant,
right,
that like we are really dependent on our vendors behaving well. And if they don't, like that can put us at grave exposure. So
this means we should hand code our own firewalls each time.
Totally. Just like cryptography, we should.
I think so. How else will you know it's secure if you don't do it yourself?
True. Absolutely.
Anyway.
All right.
I suppose one last thing to be said, I suppose, is like, don't expose any of the internet you don't have to. Like, how many of these Fortinet managers need to be exposed to the internet? Probably some variety, but probably not all of them. So don't be lazy. Don't expose stuff to the internet just because it's convenient. Stuff like this will happen. Don't do it. It's bad news bears. Don't do it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it all goes back to the basics, right? Least privilege.
Yeah.
Does it need to have access to the internet? If not, why does it? And, if you look at some of the Reddit discussions and some of the other, some of the back and forth on the Fediverse, there's a lot of discussion about people should have, quote, should have known not to have it exposed to the internet. Yet so many people did.
To be fair, there are reasons. Like, I think it's too easy to say nobody should ever do it ever. And because of your version of reality, I think there's probably lots of, like I was reading somebody was talking about lots of retail organizations use these to manage many retail sites. They have no back-end infrastructure to get to them. Like, look, we don't know everybody's situation. What I'm saying is that if you can, get it off the internet.
Amen. All right. I'm happy note. We really have to find like some like happy puppy story or kitten story to end these shows with, don't we?
I mean, we could just take the whole I don't know if it started in Top Gear, but Grand Tour ending on that terrible disappointment. With all credit to that team of writers who I just stole their work from.
Yeah,
but
imitation is the highest form of flattery, right?
Look, on the upside, you're putting out amazing pictures and cute cats, and all our cats are healthy. How's that?
There you go. That's true.
Although
That's
Betty,
true. And I unfortunately I'm currently cat and dogless. There's a this is the first time I've been here in 3 years without my pets. There's a rolled up brown blanket on my couch, and every time I walk by, I think it's my cat.
can you go to like Craigslist and get like cat escorts for the weekend?
Well, I could probably like do foster or something, but I'm gonna guess that they will not enjoy the process of having my floor replaced.
It's true. All right, I'll be sure to put out a bat signal for cat pictures to be sent to you on the regular.
Good deal. Good deal. All right, so we'll call it a night. So where can people find you online?
You can find me on the artist formerly known as Twitter as @Lerg, L-E-R-G, and on infosec.exchange, the aforementioned amazing civilization-saving Mastodon server in the Fediverse, @Lerg, L-E-R-G. And, LinkedIn, these get published, these shows are everywhere, we like to think. Even video versions for those who want to burn their retinas with the horrible visage that is my face will be up on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know which one's worse. Mine or yours. Anyway, you can find me online on infosec.exchange @Jerry, and you can find the show and all of our back episodes on our website at www.defensivesecurity.org. You can find like Mr. Kellett said, you can find us basically on every stinking podcast platform out there, now including YouTube. And, if you do like us, please give us some love. If you have any feedback, love to hear it. You can drop a comment. We would love that. Always trying to get better. If you don't like it, you can give us 5 stars and then just unsubscribe. It works. And we will talk again next week. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good week.